right, you got a Fitbit, you got an Apple Watch, you got some sort of watch tracking your heart rate. And now you know what your resting heart rate is. Is it ideal? Is your resting heart rate where it needs to be? And how do we define that? How do we even know? Let's look at a giant study that they did on resting heart rate and figure out what your resting heart rate should be together. All right, this study, which came out from Fitbit, 92,457 de-identified individuals. They pulled their resting heart rate data together. I want to show you a couple charts that I think are really interesting. So let's scroll down here first and look at this first chart that shows that an average resting heart rate for men, it's going to be, around 64. For women, more like 67. So here's one thing to note. If you are a woman and your male friends or significant others have a lower resting heart rate, that's totally normal. That is okay. So now let's look at the next thing, which I think is really interesting, which are all of these charts. So let's zoom in a little bit here. Average resting heart rate by age. And what is interesting here is you will see that this line goes up and then down, meaning you have a lower average resting heart rate when you're younger and older, which means what is the ideal resting heart rate? It's a little bit hard to say. And that's because as you age, you're not necessarily as healthy, but you have less muscle mass, you have less that your body is moving around. And so you can see that resting heart rate come down. So resting heart rate, I think what these pictures really tell us, you do find some interesting things as BMI goes up, resting heart rate goes up. Your heart rate obviously has to perfuse more body mass, which totally makes sense. The standard deviation of your resting heart rate drops, which means you're having less and less variability in your heart rate as time goes on and as you age. And let's see if there's anything else interesting here. I think that's the main things that I find interesting in this chart. So what does it mean? It means that resting heart rate it's kind of like many things. It's very individual. Now, for the most part, if you have good body mass and you're exercising, a lower resting heart rate is better. That means you have higher stroke volume, a more efficient heart. So you really want to continue to work to make that heart rate lower. But when you just look at it grossly, if you are a small, old person and you have a low resting heart rate, pat yourself on the back because you're old, but don't pat yourself on the back because you have an amazing resting heart rate, because it really isn't that simple. So some other point, we'll talk about heart rate variability, which I think is a much better measure of kind of heart health. Because it tells you the difference between kind of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic load on your heart and how your body is reacting to that system. But for resting heart rate, and I'm sorry, that was just a total nerd out. I apologize. We'll talk about it in another video. Peace.